Good evening. A high-ranking Comanchero and his brother have been ambushed at an Auburn gym. Hit in a hail of bullets, innocent people cowering where they could.
Picture this. It's 10 p.m. on a Thursday night in Perth. A man collapses outside Rockingham Hospital, blood pooling beneath him, gunshot wounds to his shoulder and thigh. But that's not the worst part. Someone deliberately burned off his tattoos while he was still alive. The tattoos that once marked him as family. The same family that just tried to kill him. This isn't just another crime story. This is about Leslie "Lethal Les" Grantham, a man who tried to walk away from one of Australia's most dangerous motorcycle gangs. And they made sure he'd never forget the price of betrayal. Stay with me, because what happened next will shock you. The night everything changed, May 15th, 2025, Rockingham Hospital's emergency department. The night shift was expecting the usual, maybe a few drunk driving accidents, some domestic disputes. They weren't prepared for what walked through their doors that Thursday evening. Actually, he didn't walk. Leslie Grantham was dumped there like garbage. The 51-year-old man was barely conscious when hospital staff found him collapsed outside their emergency entrance. Blood was everywhere. 2 gunshot wounds, one in his shoulder, another in his thigh. But what made the medical staff stop and stare wasn't the bullets. It was the burns. Someone had deliberately tortured this man. They'd use fire to burn away the tattoos on his legs. Not just any tattoos. These were Comanchero patches, symbols that marked him as a member of one of Australia's most feared outlaw motorcycle gangs. The message was clear. You can't just leave the family. But here's what makes this story even more twisted. The people who shot him, burned him, and left him for dead, they were his brothers, his own gang members. Who is Leslie "Lethal Les" Grantham? Now, you might be wondering, who is this guy, and why did his own gang try to kill him? Leslie Grantham wasn't just any member of the Comancheros. He held one of the most powerful positions in the gang hierarchy, Sergeant at Arms. Think of him as the enforcer, the guy who made sure everyone followed the rules. The guy other members feared. For years, Grantham was known throughout Perth's criminal underworld. His nickname, Lethal Les, wasn't given lightly. This was a man who'd built his reputation on violence and intimidation. He was the one doing the threatening, not receiving it. But something changed. Something made this hardened criminal decide he wanted out. And that's where this story takes a dark turn. Because in the world of outlaw motorcycle gangs, there's no such thing as retirement. The Comancheros, Australia's most dangerous gang. To understand why Leslie Grantham ended up bleeding outside a hospital, you need to understand what the Comancheros really are. They're not just a motorcycle club, they're a criminal empire. The Comancheros started back in 1968, when a Scottish immigrant named William Jock Ross decided to form his own gang after watching a John Wayne movie. That's right, one of Australia's most dangerous criminal organizations got its name from a Hollywood Western. But don't let that fool you. These guys are serious business. The gang has been involved in some of Australia's most shocking crimes. Remember the Milperra Massacre in 1984? 7 people died in a shootout between the Comancheros and the Bandidos. 4 Comancheros, 2 Bandidos, and an innocent 14-year-old bystander. Then there was the Sydney Airport brawl in 2009. Comancheros and Hells Angels started fighting right there in Terminal 3, with hundreds of travelers watching in horror. Anthony Zervis, brother of a Hells Angel, was beaten to death with bollards. These aren't just guys who like riding motorcycles. They're involved in drug trafficking, illegal weapons, extortion, and murder. The Australian government has labeled them a serious organized crime threat. And Leslie Grantham was right at the heart of it all. The code of silence. Here's something that'll blow your mind. Even after being shot and tortured by his own gang, Leslie Grantham refuses to cooperate with police. Western Australia's police commissioner, Cole Blanche, made this public. He said Grantham is following the bikie code of silence. Even though these people tried to kill him, he won't give them up. Think about that for a second. Someone shoots you, burns your skin off, and leaves you to die, and you still won't talk to police. That's how deep this loyalty runs. That's how powerful the fear is. But here's what's really interesting. The police say they have a good indication of who's responsible. They know who did this. They've got CCTV footage, vehicle registrations, witness statements. They just can't get their victim to testify. It's been 4 months since the attack. 4 months, and still no charges, because the victim himself is protecting his attackers. The investigation unfolds. Let me paint you a picture of how professional this attack was. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment violence. This was planned, coordinated, and executed with military precision. The gang crime squad released CCTV footage showing exactly how it went down. Multiple vehicles, multiple people. A meeting point at Auburn Grove train station where they swapped cars. They used a white and gray dual cab utility with registration 1BFC417. This vehicle transported Grantham to an unknown location where he was shot and burned. Then the same vehicle dumped him at the hospital. Police also identified a black Nissan Navara and a white Hyundai Tucson as being involved. 3 different vehicles, multiple gang members, all working together to send a message. But here's the part that shows you how cold these people are. After shooting him and burning him, they didn't just leave him to die. They drove him to the hospital. Why? Because they wanted him to survive. They wanted him to live with the scars, live with the memory, live with the knowledge of what happens when you try to leave. The bigger picture, gang war in Perth. What happened to Leslie Grantham isn't an isolated incident. It's part of a much larger war happening on Perth streets. The Comancheros have been expanding aggressively across Australia. They're not just in Sydney and Melbourne anymore. They're setting up chapters in every major city, including Perth. But expansion brings conflict. Other gangs don't want them there. The Hells Angels, the Bandidos, the Mongols, they all see the Comancheros as invaders. And then there's the internal warfare. The Comancheros have been going through a period of massive upheaval. Their leadership has been getting arrested left and right. Mick Murray, the Melbourne chapter president, was arrested for murder. Tarek Zahed, their national sergeant-at-arms, was shot in a murder attempt. Mark Buttle was extradited from Turkey on drug charges. When a gang is under this much pressure, they get paranoid. They start seeing enemies everywhere, including within their own ranks. That's the environment Leslie Grantham found himself in. A gang at war with everyone, including itself. The price of leaving now, you might think. Why didn't Grantham just leave quietly? Why make a big deal about it? Here's what you need to understand about outlaw motorcycle gangs. Once you're in, you're never really out. These gangs operate more like the mafia than motorcycle clubs. When you become a patched member, that's what they call full members, you take an oath. You're not just joining a club, you're joining a family, and families don't let you divorce them. The Comancheros have a specific process for people who want to leave. You have to pay your way out. That usually means giving up significant amounts of money, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's essentially a ransom for your own freedom. But even if you pay, you're never really safe. You know too much. You've seen too much. You're always going to be a potential threat. Some gangs have what they call bad standing, where they'll let you leave, but mark you as an enemy. Others have good standing, where you can leave, but you're still expected to help when called upon. But there's a third option that no one talks about. The option where they decide you know too much to ever be allowed to leave alive. The torture method. Let's talk about what they did to Grantham's tattoos, because this wasn't random violence, this was symbolic. In biker culture, your tattoos tell your story. They show which gang you belong to, what rank you hold, what you've done to earn respect. Your patches aren't just decorations, they're your identity. When someone burns off your gang tattoos, they're not just causing physical pain, they're erasing your identity. They're saying you're no longer worthy to wear those symbols. But here's the really sick part. They didn't burn them off cleanly. Medical experts who examined Grantham said the burns were consistent with someone using a blowtorch or similar device while he was conscious. They wanted him to feel every second of it. Detective Senior Sergeant Anthony Thompson described the burns as deliberate attempts to remove gang-related tattoos. These weren't accidental burns from the shooting. Someone took time to methodically burn away each tattoo. Think about the psychology behind that. Someone looked at a man they once called brother and decided to slowly burn his skin while he screamed. The hospital dump. Here's something that shows you how these criminals think. After shooting and torturing Leslie Grantham, they had a choice. They could have left him to die wherever they attacked him. Instead, they loaded him back into their vehicle and drove him to Rockingham Hospital. Why would they do that? Senior Sergeant Thompson called it callous. We believe he was dropped off and just left there, which is a rather callous way to deal with someone with life-threatening injuries. But I think it was more calculated than callous. They wanted him to survive. Dead men can't spread the word about what happens when you try to leave. Living men with permanent scars can. They dumped him outside the emergency department just before 10 p.m. Not during the busy evening hours when there would be lots of witnesses. Not in the middle of the night when help might be delayed. right at the shift change when they knew medical staff would find him quickly. This was their way of saying, "We could have killed you, but we chose not to. Remember that." Police response and investigation. The Western Australia Police Force took this attack very seriously, and they should have. When outlaw motorcycle gangs start using torture in public, it sends a message to the entire community. Detective Senior Sergeant Todd White made the police position crystal clear. "Our message to OMCGs and their supporters is clear. We will be relentless. Such acts of violence have no place within our community." But here's the problem police face. How do you prosecute a crime when your victim won't cooperate? They've got CCTV footage showing the vehicles involved. They've got witness statements. They've got forensic evidence. They even know who did it. Police Commissioner Colonel Blanche publicly stated they have a good indication of who's responsible, but they can't make arrests without victim cooperation. And Grantham isn't talking. This creates a dangerous precedent. If gangs know they can torture their own members without consequences, what's to stop them from escalating further? The broader gang war. What happened to Leslie Grantham is part of a much larger pattern of violence involving the Comancheros. Just this year alone, the gang has been linked to multiple shootings, drug trafficking operations, and violent assaults across Australia. They're not just committing crimes, they're at war. In New Zealand, a Comanchero nominee named Elijah Meyer pleaded guilty to shooting into homes where children were playing. The attacks were retribution against another member who tried to leave the gang. In Turkey, police detained 37 full-patch Comanchero members in a single operation. The gang has gone international, setting up operations across Southeast Asia and New Zealand. And in Perth specifically, they're battling for territory with established gangs like the Mongols and the Hells Angels. The Grantham shooting wasn't just about one man trying to leave. It was about the Comancheros sending a message to anyone thinking about challenging their authority. The code that protects criminals. Let's go back to Leslie Grantham's silence, because this is the part of the story that really shows you how these gangs operate. The code of silence isn't just about loyalty, it's about survival. Gang members know that cooperating with police makes them targets not just from their own gang, but from all gangs. There's a saying in the criminal underworld, snitches get stitches. But for serious organized crime, it's more like snitches get death sentences. Even if Grantham wanted to testify, he knows what would happen. His family would become targets. His friends would become targets. Anyone who ever associated with him would become targets. So he sits in silence, protecting the people who tried to kill him, because speaking up would mean signing death warrants for everyone he cares about. It's a system designed to protect criminals and silence victims. And it works. Current status and future implications. As of September 2025, no charges have been laid in the Grantham shooting. The investigation remains open, but without victim cooperation, prosecutors don't have enough evidence to proceed. Meanwhile, Grantham has been released from the hospital and is reportedly recovering from his injuries. But the scars, both physical and psychological, will last forever. The burned tattoos have left permanent marks on his legs. Every time he looks in the mirror, he'll see the reminder of what happens when you try to leave the Comancheros. And the gang members who attacked him, they're still out there, still free. Still sending the message that you can torture people in broad daylight and face no consequences as long as your victim stays quiet. What this means for Perth. The Grantham shooting has changed the landscape of organized crime in Perth. Other gang members now know exactly what the Comancheros are capable of. They know that internal disputes will be settled with extreme violence. But it's also shown law enforcement the limitations of their power. When victims won't cooperate and witnesses won't come forward, even the most obvious crimes can go unprosecuted. Detective Senior Sergeant White warned that this kind of violence undermines public safety. But warnings only work if there are consequences for ignoring them. The Gang Crime Squad has promised to be relentless in pursuing outlaw motorcycle gangs. They've increased surveillance, conducted more raids, and put more pressure on known gang members. But as long as the code of silence holds, as long as victims protect their attackers, the cycle of violence will continue. The human cost. Behind all the talk of gang warfare and criminal enterprises, there's a human being who was shot and tortured by people he trusted. Leslie Grantham spent years as a Comanchero. These weren't just colleagues, They were the people he called family. He trusted them with his life, and they repaid that trust by trying to take his life. The psychological damage from that kind of betrayal goes far beyond the physical injuries. How do you recover from learning that your own brothers want you dead? How do you sleep at night knowing that the people who shot you are still out there, still planning, still capable of coming back to finish what they started? And how do you explain to your real family, your wife, your children, why you can't go to the police for protection? Lessons and warnings. The Leslie Grantham shooting offers several important lessons about organized crime in Australia. First, outlaw motorcycle gangs are becoming more violent and more organized. This wasn't a spontaneous attack. It was a carefully planned operation involving multiple people and vehicles. Second, the code of silence that protects these gangs is stronger than ever. Even torture victims won't break it. Third, law enforcement needs new strategies to deal with uncooperative victims in organized crime cases. Traditional investigation methods aren't enough when no one will testify. And finally, the public needs to understand that these aren't harmless motorcycle enthusiasts. These are violent criminal organizations that pose a real threat to community safety. Conclusion: the price of brotherhood. As we reach the end of this story, one thing becomes clear. The attack on Leslie Grantham wasn't just about one man trying to leave a gang. It was about power, control, and the lengths people will go to maintain both. The Comancheros didn't just want to punish Grantham for leaving. They wanted to send a message to every other member thinking about walking away. They wanted to demonstrate that there is no escape, no retirement, no peaceful exit from their world. And in many ways, they succeeded. 4 months later, no one has been charged. The code of silence holds. And other gang members have learned the lesson. Loyalty isn't optional, it's mandatory. But there's another lesson here too. For all their power, for all their violence, the Comancheros couldn't make Leslie Grantham disappear. He survived, he recovered. And even though he won't talk to police, his survival itself is a form of resistance. The scars on his legs tell a story the gang didn't want told. Every time someone sees those burned tattoo marks, they'll know exactly what the Comancheros are capable of. In the end, maybe that's justice enough. Not the justice of courtrooms and prison sentences, but the justice of truth revealed. The justice of a community that now knows exactly who these people really are. Leslie Lethal Les Grantham tried to leave the Comancheros. They shot him, burned him, and left him for dead. But he's still here, still breathing. Still a living reminder that even the most powerful gangs can't always control everything. And sometimes, survival itself is the greatest victory of all. The investigation continues. The gang crime squad hasn't given up. And somewhere in Perth, the people responsible for this attack know that justice might be delayed, but it's not necessarily denied. Because in the end, the truth has a way of coming out, even when people refuse to speak it.